Oh, for a goat to be napped, you must be goated in all changelings are that. I don't know what that means. Hello and welcome to JudgeCast. This is episode 363. I am one of your hosts, Bryan and I'm joined this evening, afternoon, morning drive to work by the one and only Charles. Oh, wait a second.
Hold up.
Okay. Yeah, something's wrong here. What's wrong here, Marcos?
Was that the right order? Morning, afternoon, evening, drive to work? Oh, no, that was fine.
Sounds right. And I'm joined
do I
this
go
evening.
First? No, Charles.
I'm joined by the one and only Marcos Sanchez, right?
Oh, hello, everybody. That's me.
Oh, so that's correct. There's something still missing. What's missing? Oh, see, I'm the one and only Charles Feather, and we're missing Bryan tonight.
Yeah.
Bryan is a little under the weather.
It's caught the plague.
Yeah, we all know that the plague is running rampant, and many people have had it, and I'm sure many more people will have it. So get your shots, folks. But
get your shots. Wear a mask. Be safe.
Yeah. But Bryan's not feeling well, so he's not here with us tonight as we welcome back Lorwyn. That's right. Tonight we're going to do Lorwyn Eclipsed release notes, which is the new set coming out this weekend. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Before we get into the mechanics, we just want to do a couple of notes regarding Lorwyn Eclipsed and the set codes. The codes out of the standard, what are they called now? Draft boosters? No. Play boosters. Play boosters are all going to have the set code ECL. ECL cards are all legal in standard and all other formats. Commander cards are going to have the set code ECC, and those are going to be legal in eternal formats such as Commander, Legacy, Vintage, that old stuff. And then we're going to also get special guest cards with the set. I heard a number, I think it's 20. If that's wrong, blame the internet. That's where I heard it from.
That sounds right.
I think we have about 20 special guest cards. Some of them are really cool. A couple callbacks to the original Lorwyn, if I'm not mistaken, along with some others. Those will have the set code SPG. And that, in that case, the legality varies. So please, if you open up one of those cool set cards, make sure you check that it's legal in the format that you want to play it in before you start jamming it into your standard deck. Right? Right. Yeah. And with that, we have new mechanics.
All right, so let's start off with our new keyword action, and this one is called Blight. This is going to join the ranks of Persist and Wither as a way of putting -1/-1 counters on creatures. So we're going to look at a couple different cards that have this mechanic on them. First, we're going to look at Pyrrhic Strike for 2 and a white. It's an instant that says, as an additional cost to cast this spell, you may Blight 2. And in reminder text, it says you may put 2 -1/-1 counters on a creature you control. From there, it asks you to choose one. If this spell's additional cost was paid, choose both instead. Replacement. You can choose to destroy target artifact or enchantment or destroy target creature with mana value 3 or greater. And then we have Warren Torchmaster, a 1 and a red creature goblin warrior. He's a 2/2.
Yeah.
And it says at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may Blight 1. When you do, target creature gains haste until end of turn. And it reminds you to Blight 1, you put a -1/-1 counter on a creature you control. So, Blight N means to put N number of -1/-1 counters on a creature you control. Not that your opponent controls, because that would be busted. This isn't going to be a case where you can actually split that up. So if you have Blight 2, it doesn't mean you can put a -1 and a -1 on 2 different creatures. You have to put 2 -1/-1 counters on a singular creature you control. All instances of Blight will target a single creature you control. You can put more Blight counters on a creature than it has toughness. So in the instance of Blight 2, if you have a 1 toughness creature, it can receive those 2 -1/-1 counters exactly once, and then it goes bye-bye. Now, if you don't have any valid targets for Blight, you can't choose to Blight. Now, this would happen in a case where, for example, you don't control a creature. So you have that instant spell, the Pyrrhic Strike, that says, as an additional cost, you may blight 2. If you have no creatures, you can't do that, so you just don't get to choose to pay that additional cost. After you announce that you're casting a spell or activating an ability, players can't take actions until you are done casting/activating. So, for example, your opponents can't, in response to seeing you casting Pyrrhic Strike, try to remove a creature that you have so that you can't do the Blight 2. You're doing everything all at once when you're casting the spell, including choosing to pay the additional cost of Blight 2. Now, -1/-1 counters aren't very common. Most sets you're usually dealing with a lot of +1/+1 counters. So we do want to remind you with some -1/-1 counters, it is important to remember that when we check state-based actions, the game will automatically make an adjustment if you have both a +1/+1 and -1/-1 counter on the same creature. So let's say we have a bear cub and you have 3 +1/+1 counters on that bear cub. And then we choose to cast Pyrrhic Strike and put 2 -1/-1 counters on it at the same time. State-based actions will check and see you have 3 +1/+1 and 2 -1/-1, and it'll effectively obliterate all of the counters, just leaving a single +1/+1 counter left on the bear cub. It's like matter and antimatter. They're just going to cancel each other out until you get a remainder. And finally, when a creature has both +1/+1 counters on it and enough -1/-1 counters on it to, let's say, reduce its toughness to 0 or less, or for it to die due to lethal damage, any effects that will reference the counters that were on that creature when it died will see or remember that all the counters that were on there prior to it leaving the battlefield. So state-based actions won't be removing anything before it just died. So it will still see it had +1/+1 and -1/-1 counters on it. Whew, that is Blight.
Blight sounds pretty cool. And again, it's a callback to Persist and to Wither. So we should have players that have had experience with it before, but it's still a little bit new, and it's going to take a little bit of a learning how to do that. Okay, we have a new ability word, and that's vivid. So an ability word is going to be something that references that's used frequently on a card, and it may have some different meanings, but I think in most cases it's going to have something to do with when this creature enters. But let's take a look. We have 2 examples. We have Shrine Stiker. Yeah, that's a word.
That is a word.
Shine Striker, with the amazing art by Ron Spencer. It is a 3/3 creature elemental for 4 blue, and it has flying and vivid. And vivid is explained as when this creature enters, draw cards equal to the number of colors among permanents you control. Okay, I think I see where it's going here. Let's take a look at another one. Prisma Basher for 4 green is a 6/6 creature elemental that has trample, and it has vivid. Vivid in this case says when this creature enters, up to X target creatures you control get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of colors among permanents you control. Okay, so it has something to do with color, right? In this case, what we want to remind everybody is colors are white, blue, black, red, and green. That's it. Just 5 of them. You stop there. Colorless mana has no color. Also, they haven't added purple yet, despite my desperate pleas to R&D. So just the 5. Most lands are colorless permanents. Just because they tap for mana doesn't make them red or blue or whatever. So a mountain, when it taps, that's not actually a red permanent. It's colorless. It's just tapping for red.
Yeah. And one last thing on ability words there. So with ability words, I find the best way to remember how ability words work is the ability word doesn't have any rules text defining it.
Right.
It's just a way to remind you of things that care about a particular thing. So landfall is an ability word that says when you play land, something is going to happen, or it cares about a land entering. In this instance, it cares about the number of colors for an effect, whether it is drawing a card, giving you +X/+X, just it cares about this particular thing, but it can do it in very different ways. It doesn't have to be a trigger. It doesn't have to be the same effect every time. It can just group them together in a way that makes sense.
Exactly. Okay, so that's it for the new mechanics. We have a small boatload of returning mechanics. They are transforming double-faced cards, evoke, changeling, kindred, convoke, and behold. So we have evoke and convoke. Yay!
That's not going to get confusing at all.
It's not at all. We're going to talk about two of them, though, now. But the rest, well, we've covered most of them recently enough that we feel you should be well versed in them. Plus, it gives us more time for those sweet, sweet new goblin cards, or new cards. Yes, the new cards.
Well, technically, all of these are sweet, sweet new goblin cards because the first returning keyword ability that we're going to talk about is changeling. Changeling has appeared relatively often recently, but it's still something to dive into because it can get a little complex. For this example, we're going to look at chomping changeling. Man, the art in this set is so cool.
And this is Jeff Lobenstein. Jeff hasn't had art, I can't tell you in how long, and he keeps grinding out events. He's always a friendly face in the art gallery area, and I'm so glad he got a card.
Yeah, seriously, the art in this set is just absolutely incredible, and everything Lorwyn is just such a wonderful nostalgia hit from the past. But we'll talk about that when we wrap up. Let's talk about the chomping changeling now. This is a 1/2 creature shapeshifter for 2 and a green. And when I say creature shapeshifter, what I really mean is it has the ability changeling, which said this card is every creature type. So this is a antelope, a bear, a cat. I'm not going to read through the whole list. I thought about making a joke. I'm not actually doing that. But has the ability changing that gives it every creature type. And it says when this creature enters, destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. So changeling, as rules text, is a characteristic defining ability. Characteristic defining abilities function in all zones, not just on the battlefield. So if a creature with changeling is in the graveyard, it still has changeling and therefore is still a card with every creature subtype on it. Now here, on the card, the subtype shapeshifter appears to just kind of show you the vibe of what a changeling is. Like, it is a shapeshifter along with everything else, but shapeshifter gives you the clue of like, hey, there's more to it than just that. You could just as easily print the entire list if you want to make a magic card that is 20 feet long. But ultimately, it's whatever you want it to be. If an effect causes a creature with changeling to become a new creature type, such as, let's say, zombie, for example, it will only be a zombie unless the effect says something like, in addition to. So the big thing you want to keep an eye out for is it becomes a zombie versus it becomes a zombie in addition to its other types. And if an effect causes a creature with changeling to lose all abilities, it will still have all creature types. How can that be, you might ask? Our wonderful friends, layers. So changeling applies in the layer before the abilities layer. So changeling happens in the type layer, which comes before the abilities layer. So changeling applies as a characteristic defining ability, giving it all creature types, and then removing all abilities happens after it's already started to apply. We're not going to go back and change it, so it just is everything.
That happy little goblin looks so nice munching on a sword. Okay. Also, we're going to talk about returning card type of kindred. And this is kind of neat. So we've got 2 examples for this. We've got Crib Swap for 2 and a white, which is a kindred instant shapeshifter. And it has the text changeling. So that's interesting, an instant with changeling. And it says exile target creature. Its controller creates a 1/1 colorless shapeshifter creature token with changeling. And we also have the example of Morkant's Eyes for 1 and a green, which is a kindred enchantment elf, which has the text at the beginning of your upkeep, surveil 1, or for 4 green, sacrifice this enchantment, create X/2/2 black and green elf creature tokens where X is the number of elf cards in your graveyard, activate only as a sorcery. So kindred is a card type that allows your non-creature cards, which mostly will end up being instants and sorceries, but we have an example like the one here of an enchantment that have creature types assigned to them in their type line. So in our examples, the Morkant's Eyes is an elf, or Crib Swap is considered a shapeshifter, which for kindred instant shapeshifter, that makes it really ridiculous ridiculously toolboxy because anything can find it. If it matters, kindred is considered a card type and would be counted towards effects that refer to the number of card types among other cards in a zone. So we're looking at you, Tarmogoyf, and I guess most of the Goyf family. If you remember the card type tribal, which I would assume was around in Lorwyn, hey kids, Lorwyn was actually before I started playing Magic, so I'm super excited. I'm back in here. I'm getting to do it for the first time. I never played with Lorwyn in Draft, so I'm not positive, but I would imagine tribal was around in Lorwyn.
Yeah, it was over almost 20 years ago now. I think it was like 2008, 2007, somewhere around there.
It's been a minute, right?
Yeah.
And I know Lorwyn is like one of those sets when anybody at R&D asks, hey kids, what would you like to go back to? Lorwyn is like in the top 3 or top 5 responses every single time. So this set's really got me jazzed. But anyway, so if you remember that the card type tribal has been replaced by kindred. So any cards that used to have tribal printed on them now are functionally errated. That means that the type line text actually reads kindred for all purposes in dealing with it with the rules of the game, regardless of what it says on your paper Magic card that you have from almost 20 years ago. Yeah, I'm not going to say anything about Goblin King. We're just going to move on. R&D knows how I feel about that.
Errata.
They know how
restate your state.
Yeah, they know how I feel about that. Goblin King should be noble. I'm not going to accept any other arguments about it. And with that, hey, we've got new cards to talk about.
All right, let's get into it with Abigail, Eloquent First Year. It is a 1/1 hybrid Orzhov. So 2 mana value that can be either white or black for a legendary creature, bird, bard, with flying, first strike, and lifelink. What is this card? Holy cow. When Abigail enters, up to 1 other target creature loses all abilities. Put a flying counter, a first strike counter, and a lifelink counter on that creature.
Card's ridiculous.
That card is gas. I love this so much. I don't know why, but flying and lifelink and any other nice combat ability just always makes me super happy. But let's talk about Abigail. The triggered ability actually affects the target creature for as long as it is around. Not Abigail, but however long that creature is there. There is no duration on this ability. It just loses all abilities, period. Not until end of combat, not until end of turn, period. And then you put the flying counter, first strike counter, and lifelink counter on it, so it will end up gaining those abilities, and it will keep those abilities until they're done. So just because it lost all abilities doesn't mean it can't regain abilities later on. But the big key part here is there is no duration established for that ability, so it will continue well past when Abby is on the battlefield or not.
Cool. Let's rekindle some of our romance with Lorwyn. I'm going to try really hard to do the thing. I just...
Are you committing, Charles? We're doing this?
I don't know.
Segue, man?
I think some are going to be really hard to do, but we'll give it a go. We'll see. We'll see. What
Charles, I'm in it with you. Let's do it for Bryan.
Bryan's not here to tell us, make faces at us. Not that he does. He actually joins in rather wholeheartedly. So let's do Ashling Rekindled, which is for 1 in a red, a 1/3 legendary creature elemental sorcerer. Whenever this creature enters or transforms into Ashling Rekindled, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. And then it has the trigger at the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay 1 blue. If you do, transform Ashling. So this is a transforming double-faced card. On the reverse side, we have Ashling Rhymebound, which is a 1/3 legendary creature elemental wizard. So we went from elemental sorcerer to elemental wizard. I don't know if having to remember your spells and study them every night is necessarily a step up or a step down. I think it's a step down. We'd have to ask the D&D folks to weigh in on this, but here we go. Whenever this creature transforms into Ashling Rhymebound, and at the beginning of your first main phase, add 2 mana of any one color. Spend this mana only to cast spells with mana value 4 or greater. At the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay 1 red. If you do, transform transform Ashling. I think it's kind of cool that it's one blue to flip to the blue side and one red to flip to the red side. That's neat. We like that. Okay. So for this, we're only going to focus on the Ashling Rhinebound side. That's the blue side. And what we want to note here is if a spell is being cast with mana from Ashling Rhinebound's ability, and if that spell has X the mana cost, you use the chosen value of X to figure out the mana value of the spell, which may not seem intuitive to people at first blush, because a lot of times we tell you X is 0 or this, that, or the other. But in this case, it matters. So if you're casting some spell with X in the mana cost, so it could have like X green or X blue or whatever. If X is 5, then the mana cost is 7. Make sense? Cool.
So Charles, you bring up D&D. What is Ashling's favorite D&D spell?
Ashling's Command, of course.
Command! That's right. So Ashling's Command is a new command. Oh man, I loved the Lorwyn commands, and they were some of my favorite cards. I can't wait to see some new ones here. Let's look at Ashling's Command. Appropriately, it is 3 blue and a red for a kindred instant elemental that says choose 2. Create a token that's a copy of target elemental you control. Target player draws 2 cards. Ashling's Command deals 2 damage to each creature target player controls. And target player creates 2 treasure tokens. Whew, that's spicy. All right, so this is our first command and probably our only command. I don't know if we're going to touch on every one of them, but there is a cycle of commands in this set, just like there was in Lorwyn originally, and they're all awesome in one way, shape, or form. But let's talk about Ashling's Command specifically. First of all, the token part, the one that says create a token that's a copy of target elemental you control, the token that is a copy of that target elemental you control is copied exactly as what is printed, unless what is being copied was a token. It doesn't copy any statuses like tapped or untapped. It doesn't copy any counters that are on the card, any auras or equipment that are attached to the card, or any non-copy effects that have changed its attributes, like a giant growth, for example. If the copied permanent had X in its mana cost, X will be equal to 0. If the permanent being copied was a token, then the resulting token has all of the characteristics that were defined by the ability that created the original token. Copy?
Yeah.
If the copied permanent was copying something else, though, then the new token created by Ashling's Command enters as whatever the creature copied. So many things about copy. Any enters the battlefield effects of the original copied permanent will trigger when the token enters. This also holds true for any abilities that state as this permanent enters, or replacement effects, or this permanent enters with replacement effects. And because this is something you really want to keep an eye on with these commands here, if all of the targets that were chosen by Ashling's Command are illegal when the spell tries to resolve, then it won't do anything. But if at least one ability that targets is legal, it will still do as much as it can. I think I remember Morrow way back in the day saying they try to make commands in a way so that like you'll at least be able to do one thing that doesn't target so you don't get fully blown out. But keep that in mind. If you lose all your targets for it, you're completely out of luck.
Yeah, and like Marco said, there are a whole bunch of commands in this set. I think it's a full cycle, but I didn't do the count. I did a word search, and it's everywhere in the document. So I would imagine that we get a number of different commands, and they're all tied to I think copy effects of different creature types. A big thing about this set, and it's just side note for 2 seconds, is a lot of times when we get the play booster boxes and we open them up, we have this little card inside in the top of it that will tell you the different archetypes that are in the set. And typically it's 10 different archetypes. This set, even though it's a full set, only has 5, and they're all centered around typal themes. And I think the commands also probably center on that. We'll make sure that that's not wrong before we go to print, but should be fine. Anyway, I hope everybody out there is awake. Are you awake, Marcos?
For the most part. I just had my coffee for the evening. I'm good.
Good. So let's talk about Aurora Awakener. which for 6 and a green is a 7/7 creature giant druid. Well, of course he's a giant. He's a 7/7. He is trample, and he has vivid. And in this case, vivid is when this creature enters, you reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal X permanent cards, where X is the number of colors among permanents you control. Put any number of those permanent cards onto the battlefield. Then put the rest of the revealed cards on the bottom of your library in a random order. Okay, this only has really a couple things that we want to point out, but if an aura is put on the battlefield without being cast, the controller of the aura chooses what permanent to attach it to, so long as the permanent's a legal target. But I don't want to use the word target because it's not actually targeting. Auras put on the battlefield this way don't actually target. See? They don't target. If an aura and a creature are coming in at the same time using Aura Awakener's ability, then the aura can't come in attached to the creature that's also coming in. The aura has to attach to something that's already on the battlefield, and the creature can come in and do whatever the creature's going to do. The value of X is only determined when the ability tries to resolve. It's not determined beforehand. It's not determined at some point down the road. So when the ability goes to resolve, it's only looking at X at the time when it does that. Okay? Sounds good. Look at that guy. He's just so happy to be here.
Guess who's back? Back again. Shockland's back. Tell a friend.
Yes,
I might actually drop a beat in there. We'll see about that one. I don't want to copyright infringe.
That sounded pretty good, though. we know what you're talking about.
We're back. Shocklands are back. Well, really, some of them were back in Edge of Eternities, but the rest, they're all back. And now we know why they are back in this order. I think it had to do with the limited set here. But hey, who cares? Shocklands are back. And right now we're going to talk about Blood Crypt, but there are a few other ones in this set. Blood Crypt is a land, swamp, mountain that says in reminder text, add black or red, because once you have basic land subtypes, you get basic land mana abilities. And it has the text, as this land enters, you may pay 2 life. If you don't, it enters tapped. So first of all, even though Blood Crypt and all the other Shocklands will have basic land subtypes, like swamp, mountain in the case of Blood Crypt, they are not basic lands. So any cards like Tend the Springs, that's a search your library for a basic land card, can't find it. However, cards like Kisla Village, which was in Tarkir, which says this land enters tapped unless you control an island or a swamp, we'll see you control a swamp and you're good. Everything works there great. Now, if an effect puts a Blood Crypt or any Shockland onto the battlefield tapped, the controller can pay 2 life. This is always an option. However, it will still enter tapped even if you pay the 2 life to have it enter untapped. The reason for that is because the effect that's putting it onto the battlefield is what is having it enter tapped, as well as the effect on the Blood Crypt. So you're only overriding one of them, but the other one is still affecting it, meaning it will still enter tapped.
I'm excited. I like Shocklands. I really do. I think they're neat.
Yeah.
So how do I do this? I got nothing. So we're just gonna.
You can't craft anything here?
Oh, that's a good one. Curses foiled again. I should have known. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we did not plan that out.
Improv. Let's go.
Improv. Bogart Cursecrafter for a black and a red is a 2/3 creature goblin warlock that has death touch. Well, already I'm happy. A 2 mana 2/3 with death touch sounds great. It also has whenever another goblin you control dies, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. I see where this is going. Neat.
Oh, Charles is a happy boy.
Okay. In the unlikely and tragic event that Bogart Cursecrafter dies at the same time as other goblins you control, its ability will trigger for each of the other goblins. So if you have, 8 goblins out and somehow you do a board wipe that kills them all, they will trigger 8 times. That's awesome. Because remember, it's whenever another goblin you control dies. It doesn't count Cursecrafter. Also, maybe not unlikely, for whatever reason, goblins are fragile creatures in this set. So, y'all should be kinder to them. Seriously, be nice to them. Feed them rocks.
But they're so often the aggressor. Like that's how they get into all these things.
They're just really misunderstood, I think.
Yeah.
But maybe they are the aggressor. I don't know.
Yep. Just like Boldweir Aggressor, which is our next card. For 3 red, we have a 2/5 creature giant warrior with double strike, and other giants you control have double strike.
Woof.
That's fun. All right, so Boldweir Aggressor is important for one reason, and that's us being able to talk a little bit about how combat works. So if you control a Boldweir Aggressor and attack with like 2 or 3 other giants, they all have double strike. So during the first strike combat damage step, your opponent does something to Boldweir Aggressor, making her leave the battlefield, like an unsummon or something else that's rude. So what's going to happen is, let's say we're in first strike combat damage, and your other giants and this one have all dealt their first strike combat damage, or in the first strike combat step. Then your other giants are going to lose double strike once Boldweir Aggressor leaves the battlefield. And then we're going to go to what would be known as the normal damage step, or the regular damage step, whatever you call it. And they've already dealt their damage. Remember, the regular combat damage step says any creatures with double strike or who have not dealt damage yet this turn deal their damage now. And since they've already dealt damage in first strike, you don't get to cheat out a cheaty double strike without having double strike. If you've done it once, you're done.
Yeah, all that stuff about combat damage and double striking everything, it makes me think about arms. The right to bear arms, the right to have stout arms, like Bree of Clan Stout Arm. I don't know. We're just go with it.
We're doing it.
We're just doing it. Bree of Clan Stout Arm, for 2, a red and a white, is a 4/4 legendary creature giant warrior. Giants seem to be a little theme going on here. For 1 and a white, you can tap Bree, and you get another target creature you control gains flying and lifelink until end of turn. So she, sits there and throws stuff. At the beginning of your end step, if you gained life this turn, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost if the spell's mana value is less than or equal to the amount of life you gained this turn. Otherwise, put it into your hand. So, Bree's last ability will not trigger at all if you didn't gain life this turn. So gaining life after your end step begins won't cause it to trigger either. By then it's too late. So you enter your end step, triggers go on the stack, and then you gain life. Well, it's too late. Sorry, so sad. If you choose to cast a card exiled by Bree, you do so while the ability is still resolving and still on the stack. Literally, it's like hitting pause on the VCR tape. You ask your parents, if you don't know what a VCR tape is. In this case, timing restrictions based on card type are ignored. This is going to be one of the few times you hear that from us. A lot of times timing restrictions are really important, but because it's happening all at the same time, we get to kind of look the other way. Since you are using an alternative cost to cast the spell, any other alternative costs can't be paid. You could pay additional costs if you so choose, such as, Kicker or, all the many clones of Kicker. Any mandatory costs must also be paid when casting the spell. If the spell has X in its mana cost, X is 0. We know how that song works, right? Cool.
So, my wife's been very into all these romancy things, and I think she was telling me about Bridgerton the other day. And that made me just think about other romantic things that also started with Brig, like the 1954 American romantic musical fantasy film Brigadoon. Oh, Brigadoon. Bridget Doon's Mind. The backside of Bridget Clatchen's heart.
So hard into this.
Look, if you're going to do something, do it right. Anyways, let's talk about Bridget Clatchen's heart and Bridget Doon's Mind. The front side is Bridget Clacken's heart. Clacken or Clatchen's? I'm going to go with Clacken's.
Sure.
Clacken's heart for 2 and a white is a 3/2 legendary creature Kithkin warrior. Whenever this creature enters or transforms into Bridget Clacken's heart, create a 1/1 green and white Kithkin creature token And at the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay green. If you do, transform Brigid into Brigid Dune's Mind. Brigid Dune's Mind, yes. Legendary creature, Kithkin Soldier, not warrior anymore, soldier. Also a 3/2 with the ability tap, add X green or X white, where X is the number of other creatures you control. And at the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay white. If you do, transform Brigid. And realistically, all I wanted to talk about with this card is that the tap ability of Brigid Dune's Mind is a mana ability. It doesn't target, it generates mana, and it isn't a loyalty ability. Cool? Cool. I love when the description of the card takes so much less time than just reading the card.
I have this thing that I just wonder about. I'm super curious about. Are Kithkins just rebranded hobbits?
Yeah, effectively.
Okay,
halflings, hobbits.
I just had this burning question in mind, and I was so curious, and I had to ask, because I've always wondered that, and they seem really cool. I think they err more in the halfling side of things, but halflings are basically hobbits. So yeah, I'm glad I've answered this question for myself. I'm no longer curious. Hey, look, the next card's Burning Curiosity for 2 and a red. It's a sorcery. And it has the text, as an additional cost to cast a spell, you may blight 1, so that's a may, exile the top 2 cards of your library. If the spell's additional cost was paid, exile the top 3 cards instead. Until the end of your next turn, you may play those cards. So you follow the normal timing restrictions for all the cards that that are cast from exile that were sent there using Burning Curiosity. Now, remember, we were just talking a couple of cards ago about Brave Clan Stout Arm, not Clon. Clown, not that either. Clan Stout Arm. I'll get there. I just need to push my teeth back into my gums. But in this case, the visual, I just push those teeth back up. So here's the thing. Once they go into exile and you're allowed to cast them from there, if it's a creature, you can't cast it during combat. You have to wait until it's one of your main phases. If it's an instant, you can cast it during combat. You just have to follow the regular timing restrictions for this stuff. Right, kids? Yeah, sounds good.
Seems fun. Kind of brings me to a quiet moment of contemplation, a catharsis, if you will, which is like our next card, Catharsis, for 4 and a hybrid Boros. I'm going to keep calling these by their guild names, but really it's a hybrid red-white.
Sure.
For a 3/4 creature elemental incarnation. When this creature enters, if white was spent to cast it, create 2 1/1 green and white Kithkin creature tokens. When this creature enters, if red was spent to cast it, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain haste until end of turn. And it has evoke for hybrid red-white, hybrid Boros. You get it. So, again, the art on these cards is incredible. Absolutely love it. This psychedelic snail, I guess. I don't know, something trippy in a lava lamp that just burst out in your D&D campaign is now taking over your entire house. That's what I see here, but it's amazing. Go take a look at the art if you're listening to us in audio only. If not, enjoy the art on the screen as we talk about these really cool abilities that are on the entire cycle of evoke elementals that are at Mythic Rare in this set, like Catharsis and Deceit and things like that. The first and second abilities care about what mana was spent to cast this spell on the whole, not just what was spent for the hybrid cost. So let's say I cast Catharsis for its evoke ability, choosing hybrid red-white, so I chose to pay red-red. Well, then I chose to cast it using its ability red-red, therefore that second ability would trigger. If I cast Catharsis for its full cost of 6, and I chose to pay red-red-red, white-white-white, both abilities will trigger because I cast it using white-white mana and red-red mana. It also doesn't care if I decided to choose to pay white-white, red-red-red-red. That doesn't mean I'm going to get that second trigger twice because I spent 2 instances of red-red on it. No. All it cares about is, at minimum, did you spend XX mana of a particular color? If so, then this ability will trigger. From there, if this spell is copied, then the first 2 triggered abilities just are not going to happen. Why is that? Well, you're not casting the card. You're copying the spell as it existed on the stack. Therefore, you spent no mana to cast it, and it doesn't have any mana that you spent to cast it to check against. So it just won't happen. And again, this spell does have evoke. You can just evoke it for 1 red mana and 1 white mana. Again, this isn't strategy cast, it's JudgeCast. But we wouldn't recommend it, and let's be honest, we're going to be judging you for doing just that.
Oh boy, will we.
If you're going to do something, do it right.
Yes. So, if we're on the right path, eventually we'll get there. And I think we're on the right path. So let's talk about the champion of the path for 3 in a red, who's a 7/7 creature elemental sorcerer. Did I say 7/7? It's a 7/3. Just
you
to clarify.
Wish it was a 7/7.
Yeah, well, I start thinking about giants, and it looks kind of maybe giant-like. I don't know.
Very clearly an elemental sorcerer.
Well, yeah, there's that, but he looks like a big elemental sorcerer.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, he does.
He's just got a glass jaw.
Well, yeah, a little bit. Small butt. It could be related. Never mind. I'm not going to go there. Anyway, as an additional cost to cast the spell, you behold an elemental and exile it. Exile an elemental you control or elemental card from your hand is how you behold. Whenever another elemental you control enters, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. When this creature leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to its owner's hand. So Champion of the Path is, one of a cycle of champion cards in this set. So there's actually 4 others. For all of them, the following statement is true. If the champion is countered or otherwise fails to resolve, that is, it doesn't make it to the battlefield after being cast, then the card beheld remains in exile indefinitely. Oops.
Woof.
That means if you behold it and it's on the battlefield, that card goes into exile. If you behold it from your hand, that card goes to exile. Kind of sucks, but that's what it is. And I think it's neat because this is one of those cases where when we exile something and it's in the process of casting something that you don't get it back. It does go away, right? We chose to talk about Champions of the Path because it has some meaty things to talk about, whereas a lot of the other champions are pretty straightforward. So let's dig in why Champions of the Path is special. If an elemental you control isn't actually a creature as it enters, so kindred permanents exist, right? The second trigger still triggers. If, however, the elemental still isn't a creature when the ability resolves, it just won't do any damage. Weird, right? But it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
If the elemental that caused the second ability of champion to resolve is no longer on the battlefield when it resolves, then we use last known information to determine damage. So long as it was an actual elemental creature with a power and toughness while it was on the battlefield, that information is important for determining the amount of damage being dealt. So there are a whole bunch more champions. There's Champion of the Weird. Well, we should have done Champion of the Weird. We love that name. Champion of the Perfect. Champion of the Shoal.
My signature card.
There's another champion above it. Champion of the... Well, I can't say that word. But there's 5 champions in the set. I think there's a number of cycles in the set, which we've already discovered, and there are more. So maybe it's like a sub theme of R&D. We don't always get this many cycles in a set. I think that's neat.
Yeah, it's a subgrouping, a collective, if you will.
A collective, if you will. That sounds good. It sounds pretty hot.
Yeah, like our Collective Inferno here, which is a 3 red enchantment that has a whole lot of people standing around this massive fireball, which looks awesome. Man, Charles, you're rubbing off on me. I'm like getting excited by giant fireballs. What is happening right now? Collective Inferno has Convoke, which, reminder text, since we didn't go into it in depth at the beginning, your creatures can help cast this spell. Each creature you tap while casting this spell pays for either 1 generic mana or 1 mana of that creature's color. As this enchantment enters, choose a creature type. Double all damage that sources you control of the chosen type would deal. Cool card. So for this card, you're going to choose a creature type as it enters the battlefield. As a note to judges, maybe facing something like this before at an FNM or pre-release, etc., people are going to forget to do this. Like, it's just going to happen. Guide them and remind them that they need to do it when it's played and be clear about their choices. They need to choose creature types that are in the game, but don't have to choose types that are in their deck. Again, not strategy cast, we're JudgeCast. They can do whatever they like. But if you come to a table on a call or observe a situation where it isn't marked, have the player who cast it just make a choice and then continue playing. I personally would remind them to like at least write it down on their life total, on their life pad, or if they have a scrap of paper, just write it down and put it inside the little sleeve with it. It's easy and it'll just make sure everything is on the level, especially when you're just learning the cards to begin with. From there, damage is dealt by the same source as the original source of damage. So here, the double damage isn't being dealt by Collective Inferno. That is, unless you're up to some weird shenanigans. But typically, it's the source of the original damage just gets to double the amount of damage it would do. If an effect or multiple effects will change how damage is dealt to a creature controlled by your opponent, for instance, like preventing damage with a healing salve or something else that wasn't printed in 1993, then they choose the order in which the effects are applied. If they can reduce the damage to 0 or less before Collective Inferno doubles the damage, well, then the effect no longer applies because, well, doubling 0 doesn't do a whole lot realistically. And then from there, if damage dealt is being divided or assigned among multiple permanents, players, what have you, that damage is divided or assigned before you start applying anything that would modify that damage, like doubling the damage from this card. So for example, if you control Collective Inferno and you attack an opponent with a 5/5 creature of the chosen type, and it has trample and haste, and it's blocked by a 2/2 creature, you can assign 2 damage to the blocker and then 3 damage to the defending player. Once you've assigned that damage, then you'll apply the Collective Inferno's damage doubling, and that'll be doubled to 4 to the creature and 6 to the player. You can't just put 1 damage on the defender and say, oh, that will kill you, just wait until my Collective Inferno hits. Nope, you have to assign enough for it to be lethal before you can move on from that. And one last note on this, I love the clever wording on here. Double all damage that sources you control of the chosen type would deal. So if we have a Goblin Lightning Strike, that will now deal double the damage if you choose Goblin, because spells can have creature types. Fun!
You know, figuring out segues is fun. We need to weave things together and make them all kind of happen. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And sometimes we just dundooling along. And look.
Sometimes they done do.
Oh my goodness. What is a dundooling? I guess it's some kind of a Kithkin thing, right?
I guess.
Dundooling Weaver for 1 and a green is a 2/1 creature Kithkin druid. And they have the trigger, when this creature enters, if you control 3 or more creatures, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. So there's a whole thing here where we make sure that we always cover an intervening clause. No, that's a maze of if. We're talking about intervening if clauses. So intervening if clauses are kind of cool. You'll have a trigger that starts when or something along or at or whenever, typically when or whenever. And then after a comma, it'll say if. And when it does that, we're talking about an intervening if clause. So when this creature attacks, if you control 3 or more creatures, what it's doing is you're checking first, if it goes on the stack, you have to have 3 or more creatures to get the trigger on the stack. Now, that's only half the battle. When it comes time to actually resolve the trigger, that trigger is going to check again and make sure you still have 3 creatures. If you don't have those 3 creatures, this trigger just goes poof and disappears. So you want to make sure that you're keeping those creatures around as Dundooling Weaver is doing his thing.
Done doing his thing. He's done doing. He's ear doing. He's all the doing.
You're almost
Ear
you're almost carrying this thing all by yourself.
I'm really trying here, man. So Eardo, Carrier of Dawn, for 3 white, is a 5/5 legendary creature elemental god with flying and lifelink, and the lovely line of rules text: creature spells you cast have convoke. At the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay black. If you do, transform Eardo to Isilyu, Carrier of Twilight. Also a legendary creature elemental god, also a 5/5, also with flying and lifelink. However, this is the dark side. Each other non-token creature you control has persist. And at the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay white. If you do, transform Isilyu.
Wow.
Man, if there's a more evocative card in the set about the whole Lorwyn, Shadowmoor, light and dark, this is just beautiful.
I just want to do Mardu things with persistent goblins, and this thing just carrying the day. Wow. So
I love this card so much. Let's stop fawning over this and talk about some rules. One wonky rule is with the front face, with Eardo's side, the effect that grants convoke has to be on the battlefield in order for the creature spell you're casting to have convoke. Now, I know that sounds very obvious, but there's a little corner case here where, for example, if the spell that you're casting requires you to sacrifice a creature and you decide to sacrifice Eardo, this creature spell you're casting will no longer have convoke from the static ability on Eardo, and unless you're giving it convoke in some other way, like it normally has that, then you'll have to pay for it through some other way if you're planning on convoking. That's a really corner casey thing, but something to keep in mind. Now let's talk about the back face. If a card with persist is removed from your graveyard after it dies, so let's say your opponent has a ghost vacuum or some other similar effect, you know those cards that'll just like snipe a card out of your graveyard and toss it into exile so you can stop your shenanigans. If that happens before that wither ability resolves, it will not be returned to the battlefield when the ability goes to resolve. Once a persist creature returns to the battlefield, it's a new object, and it has no idea or relation or memory of what it previously once was. So it just comes back brand new, fresh, and ready to fight. Now, on to one of JudgeCast's favorite state-based actions. We kind of touched on this already, but we're going to remind you here. If a creature has a +1/+1 and -1/-1 counter on it, state-based actions remove an equal number of each so that it only ends up with one kind of those counters on it. If a creature with persist has -1/-1 counters on it at some point, but loses them later, then it can come back again using persist. All it cares about is whether it had a -1/-1 counter on it when it died. And if a creature that has +1/+1 counters on it gets enough -1/-1 counters on it to either cause it to be destroyed by lethal damage, so let's say a 3 toughness creature that's been dealt 2 damage and then is given a -1/-1 counter, or would be put into the graveyard for having 0 or less toughness, like a 2/2 with 2 -1/-1 counters, then persist won't trigger, because in both of those instances, persist will check the creature as it last existed on the battlefield, and at the time, it still had a -1/-1 counter on it, did not explode the counters at that point, so it will not come back. Sad days.
So Marcos.
Yes, Charles?
Do you know what it takes to make a fire burn?
Oxygen.
Yeah.
What else?
We need 3 things, really. Okay, yeah. So enable for fire to burn, you need 3 things. You need oxygen, as you stated, and that's really important. You need a source of ignition, so you need a spark. You need something to get it going. And then you need fuel. Fuel's important, right? It could be any number of things. It could be wood. It could be something else that's going to be consumed in the process of burning. But, it's really important to have these things so that you can feed the flames.
True story.
And make them bigger. So, Feed the Flames.
Nailed it.
For 3 in a red is an instant. And it has Feed the Flames deals 5 damage to target creature. If that creature would die this turn, you exile it instead. So, Feed the Flames has a replacement effect. that will exile the creature if it dies this turn for any reason, not just due to lethal damage. So if you sacrifice the creature or it dies to some other effect, as long as it's in the same turn as it got fed to the flames, yummy, yummy, it goes poof and away into exile. Well, it doesn't go poof. It just, goes away to exile. We don't actually want it to poof,
Only certain things are allowed to poof.
Poof,
This
poof,
ain't one of them.
poof, poof. You know what happens when you poof too much? You foop. I don't know. I don't know.
Oh, goodness. So, Charles, what's your favorite FOF?
My favorite FOF?
Yeah. What's your favorite FOF?
I don't know if I have a favorite FOF.
Lots of people say Fact or Fiction. I say Fact or Fiction is old news. My favorite FOF, Figure of Fable.
Ooh.
Our next card. So actually, I love all of these like figure of cards, Figure of Destiny, the Kintree version of it that was in the original Khans of Tarkir. Like, I love all these leveling up cards that care about what type it was. Anyways, let's get into it. So, Figure of Fable is a 1/1 creature, Kithkin, for a hybrid Selesnya, or hybrid green and white, and it has 3 activated abilities. The first activated ability is, again, a hybrid Selesnya. I'm not going to keep saying green-white, just saying Selesnya. Hybrid Selesnya, this creature becomes a Kithkin Scout with base power and toughness 2/3. Second ability is 1 Selesnya. If this creature is a Scout, it becomes a Kithkin Soldier with base power and toughness 4/5. Final one, 3 Selesnya. If this creature is a Soldier, it becomes a Kithkin Avatar with base power and toughness 7/8 and protection from each of your opponents. Woo! All right. So, figures are fun cards. They have a few abilities that grant them some continuous effects. First off, none of these effects have specific durations. They're just continuous and will apply in the layers for as long as Figure of Fable is on the battlefield or until something else changes the effect. Now, its abilities will overwrite its existing creature types. So you note how it starts off as a creature Kithkin, and then it says becomes a Kithkin Scout with, and not becomes a Kithkin Scout in addition to. So effectively, you're crossing out Kithkin and replacing it with Kithkin Scout. Yes, I know you can shortcut it by just adding Scout, but that's not what you're actually doing, because this ability says it becomes XX, which can matter, because later on, it can become a Kithkin Soldier or Kithkin Avatar, and we got to play by the rules here. So all this is based off of whether it was a Scout or Soldier, etc., etc. I know it's easy to just shortcut it, but you're actually just crossing out what was there and rewriting the new one, even if it still has Kithkin in there. You can activate any of Figure of Fable's abilities, regardless of whatever creature type Figure of Fable has. So, for example, the last one says, if this creature is a Soldier, it becomes a Kithkin Avatar. You can activate that as soon as you cast Figure of Fable, and it is just a lowly Kithkin. It won't do anything, but you can do it, because why not? Who cares? You play Magic how you want to play Magic. So all it cares about is if it meets the if qualifications, which, hey, intervening ifs again. And the effects from its abilities also overwrite any other effects that will, for example, set its power and toughness. Like with other cards like Curious Colossus and Abigail, just see our episode on layers for power and toughness to see how power and toughness setting interacts with other power modifying effects like counters and giant growth effects. But ultimately, power and toughness setting always happens first, and then anything else will continue to apply. Savvy?
Savvy. We like
Nailed
savvy.
it.
Just let me gather my thoughts for a second here. I'm going to need a second because I was trying to figure out.
Getting to the halfway point.
Well, not only that, but is it really the halfway point? Have we made it? Yeah,
I have no idea. I'm just saying something.
We're doing pretty good. I really like Figure of Destiny, right? That was the original red-white one. Is that the one I'm thinking of?
Yep.
I'm not wrong, right? I'm bad at card names sometimes.
Figure of Destiny.
Destiny was the one. It's been reprinted into Oblivion, but it's a neat card and it does a lot of cool stuff. So Figure of Fable is cool. Is this the only card like this with the different levels?
In this set specifically, or just in
Yeah.
general?
Yeah, in this set.
Uh,
It's cool. We'll be
yeah.
happy if it's unique. And if it's not, we'll just gather our thoughts and talk about something else. Like Gathering Stone for 4 generic mana is an artifact. And it's really kind of weird looking. It has this Dutch angle style art with this weird pillar of floating stones. It has, as this artifact enters, choose a creature type. Spells you cast of the chosen type cost 1 less to cast. When this artifact enters and at the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. If it's a card of the chosen type, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. If you don't put the card into your hand, you may put it into your graveyard. I have a sense this isn't going to see a lot of limited play, but y'all do you. So let's talk about determining the cost of a spell. You start with the mana cost or the alternative cost. You have to you've chosen to pay, like flashback. Then you calculate the cost by adding any increases, any kickers or Thalia or whatever else, subtracting any cost reductions, such as Gathering Stone, and then you apply 3-ball. I'm sorry, Trinisphere. But I call it 3-ball, so you should too. But mostly,
Valid.
you just add, right? But mostly you just add then subtract. The second ability only applies to generic costs, not colored costs, and definitely not to colorless costs. Looking at you, Mr. Kozalik over there, all smug and full of yourself. You don't have to reveal the card that you look at with Gathering Stone's third ability, even if you would count for the ability. You can choose to say, nope, not revealing, and that's fine. Again, because of the way that this card works and because of the way that this card does stuff, it's entirely possible that it just won't fit into a limited deck. But if you can, I want to see it. I think it'd be cool.
Yep. So this is a fun one, and nothing that CEDH players should be panicking about, because I guarantee you somebody will come up with the answer for this. Having said that, Glenalendra's Answer is a pretty cool card. For 2, a blue and a blue, it is an instant that says, this spell can't be countered. Counter all spells your opponents control and all abilities your opponents control. Create a 1/1 blue and black fairy creature token with flying for each spell and ability countered this way. Okay, first of all, really fun to live in Magical Christmas Land here. You're not going to get a billion fairies unless you're playing CEDH, in which case, go nuts, I want to see it. So, with this card can still have a counterspell cast targeting Glenalendra's Answer, or a rewind, or any other counterspell style effect. It can still target it. Nothing says that you can't target this with a counterspell. It's just not going to do anything when it tries to resolve. However,
Womp womp.
some of these spells will have effects that you might want. Like you can cast Rewind that says counter this and then untap some lands. So maybe you just cast it because you want to untap lands. Or, I don't know your life. Go nuts. Do whatever you want. But it's just not going to counter Glenalendra's Answer. It'll just do all the other stuff just fine. Now, Glenalendra's Answer counters only objects that are already on the stack when it goes to resolve. It doesn't prevent your opponents from casting spells. It doesn't prevent any abilities from being activated or triggers from triggering later on in the turn. And it doesn't do anything to static abilities. I know a lot of people freak out when they see this just shuts everything down. It doesn't. It's fine. You're okay. And as a reminder, activated abilities are written as cost, effect. So, as a reminder, some keyword abilities, such as equip and crew, are actually activated abilities. So even though you may not see the full text showing the cost and the colon and the effect written out, it's still there. And those are still abilities that can be countered by Glenalendra's Answer. Same as, to that end, triggered abilities. Those can also be countered as part of the all abilities part of Glenalendra's Answer. You can recognize your triggered abilities by the use of the words when, whenever, or at. So, for example, you're not going to trigger your shock land That's a replacement effect. You don't trigger your equip or crew cost. They're all different. Triggers use when, whenever, and at. And one thing that some people might be thinking about, Glenalendra's answer can't target mana abilities because they resolve immediately and don't use the stack. We already talked about mana abilities earlier. Rewind to our discussion for Brigadoon for a refresher, but mana abilities are a no-go with this spell.
I feel like this card's going to find a home in some really wild CEDH decks. And just as Marcos asked you to show him your deck if you put it in there, I'm just, okay, I'll look at it because I'll be nice and pleasant, but I just have no interest. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, you're inviting CEDH madness into your timeline?
No.
Holy cow.
Why would I do that? Why would I do that? Okay, so look, in this world, there are all kinds of naps. There's the nice short little nap. There's a longer, more restful nap. There's a siesta, which is a nap that happens south of the border somewhere, maybe north of the border. I'm not judging. There are things that happen when kids nap, kidnap. And then there's things that happen when goats nap, like goat nap. I'm really trying.
What a journey. I love it.
Goat nap for 2 and a red is a sorcery. And you gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature. It gains haste until end of turn. If that creature is a goat, it also gains +3/+0 until end of turn. Wild. Okay, so you're counting on your opponent to have goats, and then you're going to steal those goats, and you're going to make them big and aggressive. Or you can goat nap your own creature. I know it sounds a little weird, but stick with me for a second. All it asks is that it targets a creature. You can already control it. It could already be tapped or untapped. It makes no difference. As an added bonus, you have to see what the creature type is after you've done everything else, like gaining control of it, untapping it, and giving it haste. So if it's not a goat at that point, then you won't be able to get the other bonus. But maybe when you gain control of it, a static effect says all creatures you control are frogs instead of other types. It could happen. Commander's weird. But here's the other thing. You could build your deck around some changelings, and changelings are goats, right?
Yeah.
So you could you could do stupid things and win stupid prizes, and I definitely want to see that happen. For a goat to be napped, you must be goated in. All changelings are. I don't know what that means. But anyway, look, it's cool. Do the thing. It should be a lot of fun. It's 2 and a red though, so it's kind of expensive for that kind of effect. But it'd be funny, and that's worth something.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so this may actually be the card that makes CEDH players panic. I don't even have a segue for this one, other than I love the verbal dancing around its predecessors. So if you remember,
I mean, if you're not careful, I'm just gonna have to squelch this whole thing.
Yeah, there it is. Squelch it.
Yeah,
or shush it,
yeah.
Whatever. Because if you remember its predecessor from Shadowmoor, the beloved Vexing Shusher, we now have the Hexing Squelcher. Hexing Squelcher is 1 and a red for a 2/2 creature goblin sorcerer that says, this spell can't be countered. Ward, pay 2 life. Spells you control can't be countered. Other creatures you control have ward, pay 2 life. Whoo boy. Okay, this has been making some waves in CEDH circles. Yes, that third line says spells you control can't be countered. Yes, that means any spell you control, not just creatures or non-creatures or goat spells. Woof. It will be fine. Also, similar to our Glenalendra's answer card, remember that cards that can't be countered, they can be targeted by a spell that tries to counter them. It just won't do anything, so do with that what you will. But also remember that spells can still fail to resolve if they no longer have a legal target, even if they cannot be countered. So You can have a spell that has a single target lose its target and be countered by the game rules, or fail to resolve by the game rules. Or you can even have any spell be removed from the stack through some other means, like exiling spells that are on the stack, etc. So get creative, folks. It's fine. Everything is fine. Or not. Who knows? Maybe it'll blow up everything.
What, is it my turn? Oh, wait. I wasn't attentive there for a second. I'm sorry.
Pay attention, Charles.
I should pay more attention. How do you say this guy's first name? Kurol?
I'm going to go with Kirill.
Kurol? Kurol.
Yeah.
Kurol. Let's go with Kurol.
Kirill.
Kurol, attentive first year. I'm trying to be attentive to how his name is said. 1 and 2 Boros hybrid mana, so red, white, is a 3/3 legendary creature, vampire, cleric. Oh, so he bites you, then he heals you. 2 tap, tap 2 untapped creatures you control. Copy target triggered ability you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. Activate only once each turn. So let's go back to triggered abilities for a second. Remember that triggers use the word when, whenever, or at. They're often written as a condition. So trigger condition, then comma, then effect. Some keyword abilities like mobilize or prowess are triggered abilities and will have when, whenever, or at in their reminder text. When copying a triggered, and it's important to know these things because you have to be able to identify what a triggered ability is in regards to Kirill, who is very attentive to triggered abilities. All right, I'm done. I'm done with the bit. When copying a triggered ability, the source of the copy created is still the same as the source of the original ability. It's not a new Kirill. If the ability that was copied was a modal ability, something that says choose one or choose one or more or choose 3, for example, the mode is copied and can't be changed. You just get it again in the exact same configuration as before, and it will resolve in the same order as before. And that same goes for dividing damage or distributing counters. Whatever was originally established for the number of targets in actual division won't change. If you choose new targets, you must choose the same number of targets. Any choices made when the ability resolves won't have been made yet when it's copied by Kirill's ability. So if a triggered ability says choose a card name when it's resolving, you make those choices only as each individual triggered ability resolves, and you choose independently of each other. So you get your cake and you get to eat it too in this case. And if an ability is linked to a second ability, and copies of that ability are also linked to that second ability, if the second ability refers to the exile card, it refers to all cards exiled by the ability and the copy. So our friend Tidehole or Sculler, if it enters the ability is copied, you will exile 2 cards, and both will return when our friend Tidehole or Sculler leaves the battlefield.
What a hold Tidehole Sculler has on us. Even from all the way back in the day, it has this liminal hold on us that just sticks with us forever. Mostly because of the templating. But hey, we also have, hopefully, a new standabout, Liminal Hold for 3 and a white. This is an enchantment that says, when this enchantment enters, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent an opponent controls. Until this enchantment leaves the battlefield, you gain 2 life. So, Liminal Hold has a duration on its ability. And it's an important thing about these sorts of abilities that have a set duration, is that if the duration ends before the ability resolves, it never happens. So any targeted non-land permanent that an opponent controls won't leave the battlefield to this ability if Liminal Hold is destroyed before the enters trigger finishes resolving. Now, if Liminal Hold leaves, but the target is still legal, you will still gain the 2 life, however. Like, the ability will still resolve. It just won't actually do anything to exile that object. However, that won't be the case if the targeted permanent becomes an illegal target while the ability goes to resolve. So if it gains hexproof, for example, now not only is the object not being exiled, your ability is also not resolving and you will not gain the 2 life. So any objects that were attached to the thing that you exile will be put into their owner's graveyard, And any equipment that was attached to the permanent will become unattached and just clang down onto the battlefield like they got Thanos snapped. Any counters on the permanent will cease to be fully dusted. And just like any token that was exiled this way, as tokens can't exist anywhere other than the battlefield, it'll poof and won't return if liminal hold leaves the battlefield. And like we've mentioned earlier, any auras that are returning to the battlefield that are not being cast will choose a new legal target to enchant or be left in exile forever if it can't attach to anything legally. Again, most importantly, it will not even come back to the battlefield, not be attached and then go, oh, whoopsie, I guess I just go to the graveyard. It'll actually just stay in exile and not even bother trying to come back. And we will play our very mournful, sad song for your now forever lost aura.
Well, we'll play that sad song, but we'll only have a single solo voice because it's a beautiful aria.
Excellent.
I'm just amazed that you set it up so easily for me to just jump into. Mornsong Aria for 1 black is a legendary enchantment. That means you can't have more than one of them in the battlefield on your side of the battlefield at a time. Because it's legendary, folks. Players can't draw cards or gain life. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player loses 3 life, searches their library for a card, puts it into their hand, then shuffles. I'm sure there's some flavor connection between Aria and what's going on, but I don't get it. I think this is one of those times where, there's a slight disconnect in what's happening and how it's named. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something that's important. Anyway, I'm not a perfect Forthos, so let's talk about the rules because I can do that.
Yeah. Leave the answers in the comments, folks.
Yeah.
Engagement.
Tell us, join our Discord server and talk to us about it. Tell me why I'm missing the obvious. Anyway, Mornsong Aria changes the rules of the game. So it says that if you would normally do a thing, you can't. In this case, it's draw cards or gain life. So spells and abilities that would cause you to draw cards or to gain life will still resolve while this is out on the battlefield, but no player will actually perform those actions. Any other effects would still happen that were attached to spells or abilities that are asking you to draw cards or gain life, or your opponents. If an effect says to set a player's life total to a number that is higher than the player's current life total while Mornsong Aria is on the battlefield, the life total doesn't actually change. Setting a player's life total requires them to lose life or gain life enough for the life total to change to what it's being set to. So essentially, if you're at 15 life and it says set your life total to 20, it will not work. It just doesn't. So long as Mornsong Aria is on the battlefield. So you need to get that thing off the battlefield so that you can do all those life gain shenanigans, basically.
Yep. Oh, also, I just remembered what this card is referencing. So in Morningtide, there was a legendary creature, Marilyn of the Mornsong, that had this exact ability. At the beginning of each player's draw step, they lose 3 life, search the library for a card, put it into their hand, and then shuffle. And it says players can't draw cards.
So it's their aria. It's just continuing on solo voice. Beautiful. Yeah. Now I get it. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Did you get that right, everybody? Leave it in the comments if you did. Or if you didn't. That's okay. We all learn somehow. Anyways, moving on. It's time for me to start scheming. I have some very raiding schemes. Nope, that didn't work. It's okay, because the next card is raiding schemes, and there's a whole bunch of people scheming around a big old piece of parchment and getting ready to go to war for something. Raiding Schemes is an enchantment for 3, a red and a green that says each non-creature spell you cast has Conspire. Okay, Conspire? What is this, 2008? Oh,
I'm quite
wait,
sure
it wasn't Shadowmoor.
Although it feels like it sometimes.
2008, yeah. It wasn't Shadowmoor. That makes sense. Cool. Conspire. Hey, welcome back. How you been? Let me read you this reminder text because I have a feeling you're going to need it. As you cast a non-creature spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control that share a color with it. When you do, copy it, and you may choose new targets for the copy. a copy of a permanent spell becomes a token. Huh, interesting. So, this first ruling is actually a little weird because it concerns what happens if a spell has multiple instances of Conspire. So let's say you're casting a spell from 2008 from Shadowmoor, or realistically, you have 2 rating schemes on the battlefield. If a spell has multiple instances of Conspire, you may choose to pay for each of those abilities individually. Each Conspire ability triggers only if you tap 2 creatures for that specific ability. So if my counter spell has, actually let's be more fun. If my lightning bolt has Conspire, that means I can get 2 copies out of it if I tap 4 creatures, 2 for each of the 2 Conspire abilities. Now, if the spell that you are copying has any targets, the copy will have the same targets unless you choose new ones. We've kind of already talked a little bit about copy spells, but I'm going to remind you again because this should be burned into your brain as a judge because copying happens a lot. Same as we said for copying spells and triggers, etc. on the stack, all the modes, dividing of damage, distributing of things, all the same as we said before, that it will remain the same. You cannot add or remove modes. You cannot change how you're distributing or dividing things among X number of targets. Everything stays the same. You just copy it and can choose some new targets. If the spell that is copied has an X whose value was determined as the spell was cast, then the copy of the spell will also have that same value of X. And you can't choose to pay any additional costs for the copy. However, if you had to pay an additional cost for an effect on the original spell, those are copied as though the same costs were paid for the copy too. Hello, tormenting voice.
Is the next card a crow or a raven? Are you sure? It's not. It looks like a raven to me. It has this text Nevermore. Oh wait, no. That's Rice.
I was wondering where you were going with that one. That was great.
Rice the Evermore for 1 and a white is a 2/2 legendary creature elf warrior. Not a raven. Silly me. Rice has flash, and when Rice enters, another target creature you control gains persist until end of turn. This line of text is really important, so I'm gonna say it one more time. When Rice enters, another target creature you control gains persist until end of turn, because this is what we're really going to talk about a bit. And then it has for 1 white and a tap, remove any number of counters from a target creature you control, activate only as a sorcery. So if the target creature dies before the trigger on Rice resolves, it, being the creature that Rice is targeting, won't gain persist. And it does not come back with a -1/-1 counter if it dies. It just dies. If a creature has a +1/+1 counter and a -1/-1 counter on it, well, we all know how that works, right? This is an SBA we've already talked about twice, maybe 3 times already tonight.
Yeah.
They don't cancel each other out, but when SBAs are checked, they equalize. So if you have an equal number of -1/-1 and +1/+1 counters, they just go poof. They all blend together.
They explode.
Yeah. Creature's persist ability can bring it back again if it doesn't have any -1/-1 counters on it when it leaves the battlefield. So what's really important, though, is how this particular ability is phrased and what happens with creatures when they become new objects in the game. Do you already know where we're going with this? Let's see. When Rice enters, another target creature you control gains persist until end of turn. So let's say you give that creature persist, okay? Let's say that creature dies through some form of misadventure that turn, and then that creature comes back with a -1/-1 counter. Let's say, for instance, you have something else that's giving it a +1/+1 counter when new creatures come into the battlefield. That'd be cool, right? So the SBAs happen, and you end up with no counters on it, which means that when that creature dies again this turn, because you're being clever and doing combo things, it comes back, right? Wrong. That persist ability is only granted to the creature that's on the battlefield until end of turn. When that creature leaves and comes back, it doesn't actually have persist printed on it. So there's no persist anymore. So if you get clever... So you're
saying persist doesn't persist.
Yeah, if you get clever and you think you're going to combo using Rice the Evermore, it's not going to happen the way you think it'll happen. you'd actually have to make Rice leave the battlefield as well and come back in and then target that creature again, giving it persist again. Make sense?
Yep.
If
Although flavor-wise,
flavor-wise, it'd be cool.
Yeah. And actually, so I'm going to challenge the name on here. I don't think you're technically wrong. However, again, my wife is a big fantasy reader, and I think it's Reese.
It could be Reese.
For that pronunciation? It could be Reese. It's either Rice or Reese.
It should be Reese.
Tell us in the comments what you think it is.
I got a better idea. You know what we can do?
We can use the Google machines.
Yeah, we're going to do that real quick because I want to make sure I'm doing it right. It is Reese.
Hey, look at that.
Okay. All right. So Reese, the Evermore. Not the Nevermore. It's not a raven.
No, it's not.
If a creature with persist has enough +1/+1 counters and gets enough -1/-1 counters to lower its toughness to 0, well, that's going to be pretty terrible because persist won't trigger in this case. The creature does not come back. So you can -1/-1 it into oblivion if that's what you want to do.
Yep. Now, if you're going to go home and cry to us in the comments about how you can't get away with your fun shenanigans of persisting the thing over and over and over again, I might have to send you back to the nursery to cry it out. Like the sapling nursery, for 6 green, we have an enchantment that has affinity for forests. That sounds safe. Anyways, affinity for forests, the spell costs 1 generic mana less to cast for each forest you control. It has landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, create a 3/4 green treefolk creature token with reach. And 1 of the green and exile this enchantment, treefolk and forests you control gain indestructible until end of turn.
When this card was revealed, I think the internet went, and I'll use this term loosely, absolutely wild. I mean,
bonkers.
Just bonkers. This card is straight gas. It's just completely wild what they printed on this card. I'm excited.
Oh boy,
I'm excited
this is
for
a fun
green
one.
players.
Yeah, and forests. Oh goodness, there's gonna be so many shenanigans. Please don't combo this with Armageddon. Just don't be that player. Anyways, let's talk about landfall. Landfall triggers will happen whenever a land you control enters the battlefield for any reason. It triggers when you play your land for turn, or when you're playing your ramp deck and you get 5 lands out in your turn, because why not? Most importantly, landfall doesn't trigger if a permanent on the battlefield becomes a land. A land you control has to enter. That's a very important part of the triggered condition. And when a land you control enters, all the permanents you control with landfall will trigger simultaneously. One event will cause multiple triggers to happen if you have, let's say, 3 different permanents with landfall. Whoever controls the triggers will choose what order they go on the stack in, and therefore which order they will resolve in. So have fun figuring that out.
Yeah,
I believe in you, though.
Yeah. When I was young, I had this toy. It was called a Speak and Spell, right? It was really kind of cool.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It would have been cooler if it were a Seek and Spell, because then I could look for things and cast spells. Kind of like my friend Soulbright Seeker. I don't know.
I love that. That was great. Keep it going.
They're terrible tonight. They're awful. They're my worst yet, and I'm really proud of that. Soulbright Seeker for 1 red is a 2/1 creature elemental sorcerer. As an additional cost to cast a spell, behold an elemental or pay 2. Remember that bit about behold. You reveal it from your hand or you have it on the battlefield. For 1 red, it has the ability, target creature you control gains trample until end of turn. If this is your 3rd time this ability has resolved this turn, you add 4 red mana. So you add that 4 red mana only the 3rd time this last ability resolves this turn. You won't get bonus mana for doing it after the 4th time or the 5th. 6 is straight out. Thank you.
Got the Mighty Python in there.
Yeah, you gotta slip it in there. I mean, it's not exact, but it's close enough, I think.
I get it.
Yeah. Because Soulbright Seeker's activated ability has a target, it's not a mana ability. That's important. It's generating mana, but it's targeting something, so it's not strictly what we consider to be a mana ability. Also, this isn't StrategyCast, but let's talk for a second about this ability. You notice something cool about it? It says target creature you control gains trample until end of turn. It doesn't say you're only allowed to target an individual creature once. How many creatures do you need on the battlefield to use 3 red mana to get 4?
Just the one.
Just the
I
one.
love it.
Isn't that cool? You can just bing, he has trample. Bing, oh, he also has trample. Bing, oh yeah, he has trample again. It doesn't actually give him triple trample, but it does give you 4 red mana for the cost of 3. I think that's neat.
I mean, technically it does, but it just doesn't do anything.
Yeah,
But,
it doesn't do anything. It's neat. It's neat. So the ability has to be able to resolve. If the ability does not resolve because you've removed the target, your opponent's removed the target, probably not you. Why would you do that? You want the mana. But it's just one of those things that I think is kind of cool. And, this is not StrategyCast, but if you do it, write to me about it and say, hey, I did the thing.
I love the nuggets of wisdom that we get from our favorite red goblin player.
It feels like it shields us from, terrible misinformation.
Truth. Next up, we have Sig making their triumphant return to Lorwyn, or to our hearts. Sig, Wanderwine Wisdom, for 1 and a blue, is a 2/2 legendary creature, merfolk wizard.
Whose
Sig,
hearts? Whose hearts? Our hearts?
Everybody but Charles's hearts.
Everybody. There we go.
Prof's heart. How about that?
Yeah, Prof will love it.
So, Sig can't be blocked. Whenever this creature enters or transforms into Sig Wanderwine Wisdom, target creature gains, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, draw a card until end of turn. And that was, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, draw a card, all in parentheses. That is the ability, and it gains that ability until end of turn. And at the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay white. If you do, transform Sig to Sig Wanderbrine Shield. Now, Sig Wanderbrine Shield also can't be blocked, is also a 2/2, is also a legendary creature merfolk, but it's now a rogue as opposed to a wizard. Whenever this creature transforms into Sig Wanderbrine Shield, target creature you control gains protection from each color until your next turn. And at the beginning of your first main phase, you may pay blue. If you do, transform Sig. Whew, okay, so protection from each color. That line is pretty easy, but we're still going to talk about it because there can be some misconceptions. So, protection from each color means you get protection from red, white, green, blue, black, but explicitly not protected from colorless, because colorless is not a color. Got it? Got it. Good. And as always, remember that protection does a few very specific things. It prevents any damage from a source having that quality. In this case, any color in the game cannot damage this creature that is protected by Sig. It cannot be enchanted or equipped or attached by an object with a color. It cannot be blocked by a creature with that color. And it cannot be targeted by a creature with, or any source that has a color associated with it. So it's pretty safe for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be really cool if it were protected from everything, then you would never have to unbury it. But because it isn't, you may have to at some point in time unbury it. I don't know.
Excellent.
Unbury for 1 in a red is the last card in our
1 in a red? How optimistic on you.
Yeah, everything should be 1 in a red. Don't tell me that. It's unbury. Of course, it's 1 in a black because it's graveyard something shenanigan thing happening here. Black would be the right color. It's our last card in our card file for tonight for what we're talking about, with an explicit exception, which Marcus is going to cover in a second. But we're here at the end, so let's cover this instant that has choose one. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, or return 2 target creature cards that share a creature type from your graveyard to your hand. So it's like You could have pasta, but why would you only have pasta when you can get pasta and sauce? I don't know. I think pasta and sauce sounds really good. If you choose the second mode, the cards have to share a creature type. Card types and super types are not creature types, folks. So, legendary doesn't do it. Basic or artifact shenanigans don't do it. Snow doesn't do it. It has to be 2 cards that say dragon on it, or 2 cards that say, I don't know, goblin on it. If you choose the second mode and one of the chosen cards leaves the battlefield, you still return the other card to hand as long as it's a shared creature type with the card that left the graveyard. So if they were both merfolk, why anybody would play those, I don't know. And one of
Such
them
disdain.
And one of them, during the resolution of the spell, gets sent to exile because people are funny that way. You would get the other one. So that's the last card I have, but I need Marcos to talk about, a commander card because it received some special update.
Yes, the limit does not exist on how long this podcast will be, but we do have Ashling the Limitless. For 2 and a red is a legendary creature elemental sorcerer with power and toughness of 2/3. Has the ability, as printed on the card, that states, elemental spells you cast from your hand have evoke 4. So if you cast a spell for its evoke cost, it's sacrificed when it enters. And whenever you sacrifice a non-token elemental, create a token that's a copy of it. The token gains haste until end of turn. At the beginning of your next end step, sacrifice it unless you pay Wooburg, or white, blue, black, red, and green mana. Okay, so Ashling the Limitless. This is from the Commander decks. This is one of the Commander face cards, I believe. And Ashling has already received an update to its Oracle text. The updated text reads, elemental permanent spells you cast from your hand gain evoke 4 as you cast them.
Gee, I wonder why they had to fix that.
So they did walk through that a little bit. A big part of this is actually also applying to things like Zinnia Valley's Voice, that has an similarly updated text that is granting a spell offspring, as opposed to just saying creature spells you cast have offspring. And that has to do with the fact that if Ashling leaves the battlefield before that spell that you're casting with Evoke resolves, it loses that ability. So it ends up being real bad, a little wonky, a little complicated. On things like Offspring, it just ends up not having Offspring because Offspring cares about both being on the stack with Offspring and then entering and having been the result of a spell with Offspring. It's a whole weird thing. They just cleaned it up to make sure that it can work as intuitively as you expect. So effectively, when you read it, you kind of get what it means, and it just closes a weird rules loophole that might lead to unintuitive results, which I'm all for. Realistically, I like these kinds of errata to things overall that just cleans up things and makes it a little easier for us to grok the game as a whole.
Yeah, I think it's pretty fly.
Yeah, pretty fly. But on top of that, I also want to talk about a couple of updates because we're here and we got a few more seconds of your time and we have your attention at this point because let's face it, if you're still here listening to us, you're here through the long haul. So there's a few relevant updates that are happening with Lorwyn Eclipsed. First of all, Sorcerer is now a creature's subtype. And realistically, that doesn't change anything about historical cards, but I think it's like 40 cards are getting errata to add the creature type Sorcerer in addition to its other types. So, for example, Prodigal Sorcerer is not losing the Wizard subtype in favor of Sorcerer. It just is now a Wizard Sorcerer because they're just stapling Sorcerer to any card that basically has the name Sorcerer in its name already. Like if you look at the card list, it's mostly just cards that already have called themselves Sorcerer to begin with. And now they just supported it with an official creature type. So woo there.
Wait a second. So they can take time.
I was trying to just move past it, but yep, go ahead.
To fix Tim. They can take time to fix Tim, right?
Yep.
But they don't have time to fix Goblin King.
My
Interesting.
boy.
I think I'm going to have to write a letter to my congressperson about that. Go ahead.
Congressperson Dunks, keep an eye on your inbox. And moving on, there's also a slight update to the partner mechanic, specifically when it comes to the Friends Forever mechanic that was printed along the Stranger Things Universes Beyond Secret Lair, and of course the Universes Within counterparts. So now Friends Forever has been updated to become a partner mechanic variant. So now it's going to be partner Friends Forever. And that's going to line up with other cards that are in this set that have things like partner survivors and partner father and son. Effectively, this just stops them having to create a brand new rules entry every time they try to create a flavorful partner mechanic for effectively a Universes Beyond set or just whatever flavor they want to put in here. But really, it's just partner. So they're just saying, hey, partner just has a whole bunch of subvariants like this and Friends Forever. And Friends Forever just gets cleaned up.
So it's subset partner, subset partner, subset partner, correct? Something like that?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. They're all partner, then subset of partner that you can choose from to partner up with each other. So partner Friends Forever, partner survivors. Interestingly, I think I noted somewhere that this does not include Doctor's Companion, but I think Doctor's Companion has a couple of slightly different tweaks to it that doesn't make it fall within that. I'm not 100% sure. I didn't read into that one, but that's okay. We've talked long enough about all this already, and you get the picture. For more information on this, definitely check the description and our show notes for the link to the update bulletin that has all of these erratas and rules text changes.
Cool.
We did it.
Yeah, we got there. Yeah. So how do you feel about Lorwyn? Were you around for the original Lorwyn? Did you play in the original set?
I did not. So I didn't come back to Magic until Gatecrash era, so well past the Lorwyn era. I will say a significant amount of the commander decks I started to build early on in playing Magic really relied heavily on Lorwyn block
for sure.
decks and Shadowmoor block cards. Because, man, there's this set just, this plane, this IP, this everything about this just reeks of flavor and really intricate combinations of things. Like I had like every one of the lieges in one ridiculous like Corona God commander deck that just went ham on devotion and the gods, and I just needed everything that had all the pips. And hey, hybrid mana is easy to do, right? It was just, yeah, there was a lot to it. But so many of my favorite cards from the history of Magic, when I was first like really diving into what is Magic as a newer player, so many of my favorites ended up coming from the Lorwyn block that I am so happy to see it. And I'll be honest with you, I am more excited for this set than I have been for any set, I think, since Tarkir.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's
Tarkir. I lost my mind
for.
Well,
I knew you were excited for the IP for Spider-Man. I know that the set didn't work out in terms of some things, but that's good to know. So for me, and you mentioned that whole thing about how when you were building Commander, a lot of your cards and things came from this. I mean, I'm a Goblin player for the most part. I do a lot of things. I really do. Don't put me into that particular box completely, but there are a lot of Goblins that come from Lorwyn, and I use many of them. So I've always been familiar with the IP just from this plane, from that perspective. So I am so jazzed to be back. I'm not sure all of the Goblins will work out for me in this set, but I'm really excited to explore it a little bit. I love all the cycles. I was counting as we went. I got up to 5 or 6. I'm not sure if it's actually that many or if it's even more. But there are a whole bunch of cycles in this set, I think that's neat. So yeah, I hope players embrace it. And I guess, it'll be one of those time will tell things, and we'll see how it all goes. But I did notice one thing as we were doing release notes. See, peel back the curtain for a second. Before we go live with this episode, this always ends up, we do notes for all of our episodes, and a lot of them are just glorified outline. But for release notes episodes, we put the card into the file that we have, the shared file that we look at. We write out a whole bunch of things that go with each card. We end up with anywhere between, I would say, 35 to 45 or even 50 pages of notes because of the way that things stretch out. This set, as we were doing this set has a lot of cards that have a lot of the same notes. I guess it's because of the cycles. It's because of the similar effects. So while we probably spent 2 or so hours talking tonight, and it'll distill down to what it distills down to, I think that mechanically, even though there's convoke, evoke, transforming double-faced cards, vivid, the new persist mechanic, even though there's all these different mechanics, I think a lot of this is more grokkable than a set has been in a minute. There's a lot of copy effects, but all of them really work the same. And once you start to do it once or twice, it's really not hard. The counter effects, the -1/-1, that's pretty clear. I think this set's going to be not overwhelmingly intensive for new players, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah, it is interesting. I don't want to be a hater of other IPs and universes beyond stuff in general, because I think enough content creators out there talk about that for everybody's piece. But there is something to be said that the sets that have gotten me the most hyped about both the cards and the mechanics and the play patterns so far have just been the cards that are sets that we've been to and planes that we've been to and Magic IP in general. Like, I'm really intrigued to see what Strixhaven brings. I really was a huge fan of Tarkir and love everything that set did. And this set just seems to be like a home run. And it's funny, I think universally, more so than a lot of other sets, everybody's losing their minds over Lorwyn. Even like casual players are like, oh my goodness, Lorwyn is so good. It is so stacked. And they're just not saying the same thing about some other sets recently. And that's just something to be noted, I think.
For sure.
But it seems like a lot of fun. I'm really excited to play it. I'm bummed I won't be able to get to do any pre-releasing this weekend because I have some prior commitments, but I'm very excited for everybody to do some really fun stuff with the set, and I cannot wait to get my hands on and start doing some drafts.
Outstanding. Well, you'll have to let me know what you think of it, because I will get to pre-release it this weekend, and I'm draft is my bread and butter, so I cannot wait until a little over a week from now. All right, that's our episode. So what will we do for the next show? Well, we'll have to wait and see. Ultimately, we should probably talk to Bryan when he's actually feeling a little bit better and figure that out. So it'll be a little surprise for you, and it will be a little surprise for us because we just don't know yet. Until then, you can send us an email at judgecast@gmail.com. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on BlueSky at judgecast.bsky.social and on Twitter at JudgeCast. Don't forget to check out our show notes for these links and more, including our YouTube channel where you can find this podcast and our L1 Essentials series. While you're at it, hop onto our Discord server for judges new and old, fans, and anyone who supports the judging community. I'm Charles Featherer, and I keep it fair.
I'm Marcos Sanchez, and I keep it fun.
And I'm Bryan Perliman, and I keep it all kinds of nonsense all the time, because that's my job as Bryan Perliman. I close with something funny. Funny, ha ha. You need to laugh. Ha ha.